Today we're going to talk about pornography and its effects on the viewers, the people who are watching it. I watched some pornography when I was younger, when I was like middle school, early high school. Did you watch porn when you were younger?
No, I didn't ever watch pornography until I was married.
Yeah, with me.
Yeah.
It's really hard to find good information on what the effects of pornography are on your brain, on an adolescent brain, because a lot of the research is all religiously funded. A lot of it comes out of church groups that do their own research, and that research can be extremely biased. So it's really hard to find accurate information on it. It's pretty well known now that the target audience for pornography is young men and boys that are under the age of 18, even though they're not supposed to be watching it. It's not legal for them to watch it. That is the target audience. So me as a young teenage boy, I was the target audience. It was targeted towards me and trying to get me to start watching it with the hope that I would continue watching it for the rest of my life.
Well, I think that is obviously their business model is the younger they can get you. It's sort of like how cigarettes have always been. The younger they can get you addicted to something, the more you're going to consume that product. So that makes sense. And I also think the younger you are when you start to watch it, the less you realize that it isn't overly realistic. You're seeing this thing, you've never experienced this thing. So you assume that that's the way that it's going to be.
So a few years ago, we were like, "Hey, let's try watching some porn together to see what that's like. See if it's something we enjoy." Because we know couples that will watch it together, and they seem to like it. It seems to be an enriching thing for them, and so we're like, "Let's find some porn we like," and we could not find anything that it was even remotely close to what sex looks like in real life, a healthy sexual interaction, or just good, something that would actually be pleasurable. And so it was like, man, this is like embarrassingly awful to watch. When you're young, when you're a teenager, you don't know what sex looks like if you've never had it. And even if you are having it, you're probably it's new to you. There are a lot of young men who start watching pornography, and then when they get into a relationship and start to be sexually active, they think that's what sex looks like. And they try to do things that they see in pornography that's kind of setting them up to fail, to have an experience that isn't going to be very good for the person that they are with, for their partner. I think it encourages young men to try to go really far sexually in their relationships really quick. Young men want to make these big jumps instead of that slower natural progression that is more comfortable for everyone and ends up being a better sexual experience for everyone.
I also think it creates a sexual experience that is not pleasurable for either party, really. I think it tends to be set up for someone to watch while they are masturbating. And that tends to, especially for men, not be a long, drawn out process. I don't know that men are typically running a hot bath, putting on some, a feature length pornographic film so that they can spend 2 hours exploring their bodies and having an enriching sexual experience. I think typically they're watching porn, they're masturbating, it's quick. I think it's made to get the man to where he wants to be quickly. I think there's a lot of guilt and shame that comes with pornography for a lot of men, especially married men, especially religious men or men who have grown up thinking that, pornography is bad or masturbation. Both are bad. I think they want it to be quick and get it done. That moves into if this is what young men think that sexual experience is like, that's not how women work. We don't typically we're not, oh, I like this person, jump into bed. 5 minutes later, we've had a pleasurable experience, especially when you're young and inexperienced. So when these boys see this, oh, the woman comes over and she's ready to go in 30 seconds, and this is how it progresses. Then when they actually transition that into an actual sexual experience, they've seen, oh, the women in these videos I watch, they seem happy. They seem like they like it. Even if they've had some sexual experiences with women who appear to like it, that doesn't necessarily mean the women are liking it, because women are conditioned to make the man feel like he did a good job, whether we've enjoyed it or not. And everyone's sexual experience and expression and the way that they enjoy things is different. So I can't say that no women like, something like that. However, I think, especially for young people who are engaging in sex for the first time, it's got to be a little bit slower and figure each other out and learn. And then consent obviously comes into play a lot. I think probably women, young women especially, agree to things either explicitly or just by not agreeing to things that they're not comfortable with and they don't like, and that hurt and feel uncomfortable because of what the boy is doing based on what he's seen in the videos that he watches. And so I think it's like all of these different things come into play, and a young woman might think that that's what sex is like too, if that's what she's experiencing. I think a lot of women go into adulthood thinking that sex is terrible and they hate it because they've only ever had unfulfilling, painful, or at the very least, just not very pleasant experience in sex. It hurts all parties involved when that is all someone knows and believes to be the only way that it can be.
Well, and I think that that can go both ways for a young man that's exploring sexuality for the first time and thinking that it's going to be like pornography. You're right that there is the shame surrounding masturbation, and a lot of people, when they masturbate, want it to be as quick as possible, and it's not really a focus on pleasure. And so I think for a lot of men, this idea of a pleasurable experience and masturbation or having an orgasm are these two separate ideas, that one is something that they're wanting to do quickly to get it done to relieve pressure or to relieve stress or something else for a chemical reason. And then the other thing being pleasure for the sake of pleasure and having a fun, pleasurable experience. And one of those things you want to go really quick. The other thing you want to take as long as possible. Like the longer it takes, the better. You can have negative impacts in both directions. One of those being that if you are used to trying to get this done as quickly as possible, you're going to watch a pornographic film, you're going to watch something on one of these tube sites, and it's going to be 10, 15 minutes. You're going as you just want to get this over with and done. If that's what you're doing, if that's what your practice is, your personal like sexual practice with yourself, then when you become sexually active, you're going to continue that same practice that you've been practicing. And the amount of time that you're spending there might not be enough time for your partner, the person that you're with, to even be ready to do anything. But then you have on the other side of that, you might see some pornographic film where they are doing an activity for an hour that I shouldn't say no one, but like 99.999% of people could not possibly do for an hour. Because when you're watching one of those films, they have a lot of cuts to get one scene. Like one scene might be 10 minutes long. They might have spent 3 hours filming it. And like every time the camera angle changes, they might have taken a break, gotten some water. Sometimes they do things in those films that a human cannot physically do. When I started making some of these type videos, I had someone reach out to me who is an ex-porn star, and she talked to me about how so much of it is fake, and they use a lot of prosthetics. We know that Hollywood does this, that they'll change the way someone's face looks, they'll change their nose, they use all kinds of prosthetics to change the way a person looks. They do the same thing in the porn industry, where you might see a penis that is not actually that man's penis, and it will stay erect forever because it's not real, and it is larger than what that man actually has. And so I also think a lot of young men will watch some of these films and be very self-conscious about their own bodies because they have no idea that what they're looking at is completely fake. That is not even that person's body. They're not looking at a real body at all.
Similarly, they're not looking at a real female body either in some ways, and not necessarily prosthetics, but like you have unattainable women's bodies. So you have this idea that like we're used to as women, we're looking at models and these women who their entire career is being beautiful, and they put all of their time and effort into working out and dieting and exercising, and some of them getting surgery or, whatever. Their job is being beautiful.
Well, I think that's where you also get into, because there is this industry that is targeted so much towards young men and boys, the people in those videos tend to be very young looking. It's one of those things that, like, when you're a 13-year-old boy, you don't think about how young they look. But then if we, like I said a few years ago, we're like, let's try this, see if it's something we enjoy doing together. Then we're like, oh man, there's like people very, very young in here. I could see how people who start watching when they're really young and just continue watching pornography for their whole life, I could see it being kind of like the frog that won't jump out of a boiling pot, where you get older, but the people in the films that you're watching don't. And so you're continuing to watch these people who are very, very young. That if I knew that person in real life, I'd be like, this is a child. That I know they're an adult, but I mean, like, I taught college students and their children, and I feel like that's a lot of the same age that porn stars are. And so I think if you're continuing to watch it from the time you're young to when you're an adult, you might not even realize that you're watching people that are barely adults.
We've watched some foreign films that have more sexually explicit content, and they tend to be a lot more realistic in their portrayal of sexuality, and it's much less like your kind of standard Pornhub porn. Like it's much more cinematic and relational. After watching some of those, I have looked up the actors. Again, very young. They tend to be very young. In Europe, I think they can even be younger than what they would be able to be here in America. And also, there was one in particular that we watched. It was a French film, and they were very young. And also, the producer and director were apparently very difficult to work with, made them work long, long hours. Like, they would be on the set like 6 hours doing these sex scenes and not getting breaks and being forced to do things that they weren't comfortable with and hadn't originally agreed to. But then here they are in the middle of this film. They're being paid. They're going to be in a movie. There's a lot of reasons why they continue to do these things that they weren't comfortable with, that pushes those boundaries of consent. It's like, yeah, they didn't say no and they didn't walk off the set, but there's a lot of reasons why that wasn't really feasible for them to do, even though they were uncomfortable. And so even when you have people who are of age and consent to making films, it doesn't necessarily mean that they were treated well in the process, or that all of the things that they had to do were things that they felt comfortable doing. I do know for a fact that there are people who make films, who make videos, who have OnlyFans, who put content out there, who work in like strip clubs and sex clubs and things like that. I know personally many people who do that, and they enjoy it. They like it. It's their choice. Even if they could have a different career, that's the career they have chosen, and it empowers them and they like it. So it's like, I know that also does exist because people are vastly different. And just because maybe I wouldn't enjoy that career, that doesn't mean that someone else wouldn't enjoy that career. So there is ethical pornography out there. But I think the issue as consumers that we find is, how do you find that content? How do you find ethical pornography? Most likely it's going to be the kind of content that's behind a higher paywall. And that, therefore, you have young people who are not consuming ethical pornography because they're not paying for it. You're not having 14-year-old boys paying to look at adult content on the internet. They're going to be consuming the free adult content, which is most likely going to be where you have more of those ethical concerns.
Yeah, I did some research a while back trying to figure out what ethical porn would look like. If porn could be ethical, how would you know that you are watching ethical porn? And it's almost impossible to know if ethical porn exists. I would say that the vast majority of porn is not ethical. There's a lot of sex trafficking. There's a lot of exploitation of very young people. They will enter this industry thinking that they're going to be respected in this industry, thinking that they're going to be treated well and are actually instead pushed way past their boundaries, given substances that they don't want to take. And I mean, being raped quite a lot. So that is where, if you are watching a lot of pornography, you are watching young women be exploited. You are watching young women be abused. So that's where I did some research into, okay, are there ethical porn studios that exist? Well, every porn studio claims to be ethical. They all claim to have these safeguards in place. But then when you talk to porn stars, they say that those safeguards aren't really in place and it's not really as ethical as they claim. And so you can't really trust a porn studio that tells you that what they're doing is ethical. Whatever it is that young people are accessing on the internet that is free, that is exploitation. There is this idea that we should tell people like porn is bad, don't watch porn. It's sinful, it's terrible. You're destroying your soul. You might be negatively impacting your self-image. You might be negative. It's very likely that it's going to negatively impact your relationships, your ability to make and maintain healthy relationships and long-term relationships. It has a lot of negative impacts. But I also know that people are going to watch it. There are so many people who, in their own mind, think this is bad and this is harmful to my soul, this is sinful, but I still watch it. There are a lot of people that way. One of the issues with that is that you don't think of the ethics of it if you think you're already doing something bad. That you're like, I'm already sinning. I'm sinning against my own body. I'm already doing something evil. I'm already doing something bad. So why am I going to look into whether or not the bad thing I'm doing is ethical? I know I'm not doing something good. So what do I care about the ethics? I feel like the exploitation of young women and the abuse of young women and the rape of young women is something we should all care about. And even if you yourself enjoy consuming this content, I feel like just because you feel bad about yourself, that doesn't mean that abuse is okay. That doesn't mean that you can overlook what the industry is doing.
I agree that people are going to watch it, especially young men are going to watch pornography. I don't know that I've ever met a guy who has never watched it. I have met women who have never watched it, many women who have never watched it. I've never talked to a guy when this is like a topic of conversation who hasn't seen it. It's not like this website, this production company, this whatever is ethical porn. So let's help navigate young people to this. There isn't something like that. So what is the suggestion there? What's the recommendation for young people? Is there a way for them to look up more ethical porn?
A conversation that I've never heard of anyone having with a young man or a teenage boy is the idea that pleasure is an okay thing. It's actually a good thing. Figuring your body out and figuring out how your own body works and figuring out how you experience pleasure, that's a good thing. That's something you should be doing. You should be learning how your own body works. You should be learning what you like, what you think feels good. That is a great thing to do. There's a lot of shame surrounding the idea of pleasure for young men. There's a lot of this messaging of, oh, you're going to suddenly be horny monsters and uncontrollable, depraved little freaks. Instead of being like, well, your body is going to start feeling things. You're going to start having a lot of this pent-up energy that you're going to start having sexual attraction, all of these things. You shouldn't be rejecting your body. You shouldn't be rejecting the way you feel inside. You shouldn't be rejecting that tension. You shouldn't be rejecting that stress. You should definitely be trying to get connected to yourself and connected to your body. I think a lot of young men have this desire to disconnect from their bodies. They don't want to feel that pleasure. They don't want to desire pleasure. They want to disconnect what they're feeling from what they're doing. And so pornography is a way of externalizing that pleasure. It's something for them to focus on this other thing so they're not focusing on their own body. It's good for us to actually focus on our own bodies and get to know our own bodies, because that's actually going to be healthy for us and lead to us having a better sexual life later. If you go into a relationship later and you start to become sexually active and you are already well in tuned with your own body and have an understanding of what you find pleasurable and have an understanding of what pleasure means to you, that is something that's going to benefit you. Watching porn on Pornhub and thinking that's what your sex life is going to be like, and that these are the actions that make good sex, that is harmful. And so you exploring your own self, exploring your own pleasure, exploring your own body, that when you get a partner extends into, okay, now I want to have a similar understanding of your body and your pleasure and what makes you specifically experience a good sexual experience. And that isn't connected to what other people are doing, what you think other people are doing, what you think sex is supposed to look like. Because, like, sex between two people isn't going to look like sex between two other people. It's going to look like its own thing. And it's really going to be good if you have an understanding of your body and you extend that into wanting to have an understanding of your partner's body and what they as a person find pleasurable, not what people find pleasurable, not what you think people like, but what they specifically like. It's okay to like pleasure and to experience pleasure and to focus on your own pleasure. You don't have to externalize that into pornography.
And I think all of that goes for young women as well. The guilt and shame is also there. I think it's there for everyone, especially for young people who grow up in conservative religious households. But even those who don't, if they don't have parents who are really open about that, still have the guilt and shame of this feels like something bad because it's something that's not talked about. Any kind of taboo topic or secret topic or, inappropriate topics, like you're going to feel bad when you start to be interested in those things. And so I think the same goes for young women in learning what they like. I've met so many adult women who don't know what they find pleasurable. They have no idea. They don't know what feels good. Some of them have never had an orgasm. They don't understand their own bodies. They feel uncomfortable even touching their own bodies or talking about their own bodies. They don't know the female anatomy. I mean, I was an adult before I even understood the female anatomy at all. I didn't even know what all the different parts were. We don't learn that. And so it's something that as a young person, figuring all of that out in a safe way, in a way that you don't feel shame about. And I think if young people stopped having so much shame surrounding sex and seeing sexuality as a positive thing, as a connective thing for themselves, connecting, as you said, connecting to your own body, finding your own pleasure, then I feel like if you have two individuals, two young people who have explored their own bodies, they know what they like, they feel comfortable with their own sexuality, and you put those two young people together and they're able to communicate better. Because if you're not embarrassed and you don't feel shame around sex, it's a lot easier to talk about it with a partner. And it's like you and I, when we got married very young, and we had a really hard time for many years talking about sex because even though we had it, and even though we talked about everything, always, we talk about so many things. That was the one thing that was always uncomfortable to talk about because we grew up as that being an uncomfortable thing you don't talk about. But if you have young people that are comfortable talking about it, then that conversation is open. You know what the other person consents to. You can learn about each other's boundaries. You can explore together. And then you can try things and that person's like, I didn't love that. Okay, let's not do that again. Or here's something that I did like. This is what feels good when I do it to myself. You try doing this for me. All of these things, how many of us actually, even as adults, are able to have those conversations with our partners? Not a lot of us. And so if you are able to feel comfort in sex so young, you also are going to have much more pleasurable experiences when you start becoming sexually active And instead of being like, oh, I'm sexually active and I'm going to pretend like I'm not, or this is a bad thing, it's like, no, okay, you're going to be sexually active. Maybe it's younger than what your parents would like, but if you're safe, if you're using protection, if you are talking with your partner about what you're okay with and what you're not okay with, you're getting consent from your partner. These are all very healthy things in relationships. And then kind of what we've found, porn is boring because it doesn't like this. We're always saying we have so much better sex than the porn. So like, why we find it and we're just like, we end up being like, this doesn't even turn us on because it's so bad. I do think that that's actually, it's almost a safeguard against a porn addiction if you don't like the porn because it's not as good as the sex you have.
Well, and that makes sense though, right? Like, porn can never be as good as sex.
It shouldn't be.
If you're trying to mimic pornography, you're going to have bad sex. And if you are just continually trying to make bad sex work, it's not going to work. And it's not going to enrich your relationship. It's just not going to be fun.
Well, and I think obviously a lot of people use pornography when they are not sexually active with a partner. And so that's a different aspect of that. I think still what you're saying about connecting with yourself, being comfortable with your own pleasure, not feeling that there's something wrong with that, even as adults, there are ways to explore sexuality on your own that don't involve pornography.
I think my mom did the best that she could to talk to us about the industry, but there's not much information now, and there was even less then. But I think the things that, if I could talk to my young self, what I would really drive home is that sexuality's not bad, and pleasure's not bad, and your body's not bad, exploring your body is not bad. All of those are good things. The porn industry is fake. It is super fake. Nothing that you see in any of those videos is real. It's not real. Their body parts are fake. The way that they are acting is fake. If you are watching pornography and you think that's what sex is like, then you are going to have some rough sexual experiences. You might end up harming your partner. You might violate the boundaries. If you are mimicking what you see in pornography, there's a good chance that you are going to violate your partner, that you are not going to get the consent that you should get, and that you're going to do things you're not ready for. You're going to pressure them to do things they're not ready for. That this is not a guide. I also think a lot of young people watch pornography because they're like, when I have sex, I want to know what I'm doing. I don't want to be embarrassingly bad at it, so I'm going to watch these things to get an idea of what can be done, because I want to be good at it the first time. Which no one's good at anything the first time they do it. Watching those is not going to make you good the first time. Doing the things that you see in pornography is not going to make you good at sex. Just get out of your mind this idea that this is what sex looks like. And then the other thing that I would want to really drive home is that there is no way to know that you are not watching a young woman be violated without her consent. There's no way for you to know that she hasn't been drugged and violated for hours at a time and you're watching it. If you are watching pornography regularly and you're regularly watching these films, you are definitely watching young women get abused.
As we've talked about, not wanting to make something shameful and not wanting to make them feel bad about what they have desires to do. And then we've talked about how specifically young men will watch porn if they know that, but they still have a desire to watch it. How do you have a young boy who knows that if you're watching porn, you're probably watching women get raped, but they still feel a desire to watch that, not because they want to watch women be raped, but because they have a desire to watch two people have sex? It's like, I agree with what you're saying, but also on the flip side of that, then you're inviting in a whole separate like amount of guilt for a boy to be like, I'm watching this, but oh my gosh, I'm a horrible person because this woman could be getting raped.
Well, and that's hard. That's hard when you have the idea that you having a desire to see a woman or to see someone's body or whatever it is that you're desiring to see, that's actually pretty normal. And like, that's not evil. It's not evil that you desire sex and desire sexuality and enjoy looking at people. That's not an evil thing. That's not a bad thing. You're not a bad person because you enjoy that. But it's like I also don't want to act like there isn't something bad about the porn industry. I don't want to act like it is okay. I can't say that it is okay to watch pornography. A lot of young women are raped. There's a lot of sex trafficking in this industry. There's a lot of exploitation of young women, young men as well, but mostly young women. And there's just no way around that. That's just the truth. And I think that we should be honest with our kids and say the truth. And the truth is that there is no way to ensure that you are not watching a young woman get abused.
You know, if a kid is old enough to be having these conversations, they're probably old enough to understand that distinction. That it's like, you aren't bad because you want to watch porn. Porn is bad, not because people are having sex, but because of all these other things.
So this video, like all the other Humans in Training videos, if you look in the description, you will find a worksheet that will help you work through some of these ideas yourself and think about what your approach to this topic is going to be. I'm a cool mom.